Hi guys, it's Jennifer and I am back. If you're watching me on YouTube, basically this channel was born and it still has its primary purpose. And if you are using, have ever used, know anybody that's using, are about to become on benzodiazepine in particular, but really any type of psychiatric drug. I say benzodiazepine because it's one of the most dangerous, even life-threatening in terms of improper tapering, abrupt withdrawal, etc. It then kind of morphed into what I quickly saw as a much bigger picture and a much bigger societal issue that needs to be addressed, because we're in the middle of a national mental health crisis, the same way we came upon the fentanyl crisis. And basically, I think the fentanyl crisis was born of, the days of OxyContin, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with the whole Purdue thing and the makers of OxyContin and how they utilized the marketing and the reps and basically lied to the doctors. And when that didn't work anymore, they incentivized them to keep pushing this. And I know my own son at 16 years old had sprained an ankle, and I had absolutely no say in this, but he was given a Percocet, and why he was, this is his pediatrician who's been taking care of him since he was born. And, why I'm there, I might as well give you a little bit of Adderall for ADD. I was supposed to have full medical knowledge and be participatory in those decisions, and I wasn't. And so it didn't have to be OxyContin per se, although that was probably the most dangerous and the most addictive. I knew of cops that was smashing into stores, pharmacies, and robbing places. These things got so insane. Stopping them is definitely a step in the right direction. It's not real common, although it's not impossible, to get a prescription for that anymore. It's basically mainly and primarily just used the only place it should be, which is in hospitals. But in any event, you can go back and see some of my videos on the benzodiazepine, and here's where I feel we're going to run into problems, even with some of the content that I've put out that I want to correct, because I don't want to be part of the problem. I want to be part of the solution. Basically, I know my experience started in the late 90s, but I think they started pumping out these SSRIs and benzodiazepines probably about 40, 50 years ago. I know we didn't see them on television, God forbid, until early 90s is the first time I recall actually seeing an ad for an antidepressant. The ad with the bummed out dog who's not getting any interaction, and the guy just doesn't want to throw the ball, and then he takes Effexor or Seroquel or any number of Prozac, you name it. Pick your drug, pick your mood, pick your emotion, and you can diagnose or get a diagnosis for it, and then get a pill and a treatment for it. That's where the crisis is being born from. But there's a special darkness and danger when it comes to benzodiazepine. They were never designed or created to be prescribed. I would say if you're going past a week, you're probably playing with fire. I can see some benefit as an adult, and I do mean adult, like as in fully developed brain. There's an approximate generalized age for that, but it is different for every individual. I realize that. But, maybe if you got into a car accident, or you're going through a divorce or loss of a loved one, a death in the family, etc., something really tragic, a little crutch for a few days for those who need it. After a week, you're going into dangerous territory. But the reality of the situation, is there are over 100 million of us as I speak, and those are the counted ones in these polls for various resources. I've gotten as little as 60 million Americans and as high as 100 million Americans. And I don't know about people who aren't Americans that certainly have access to our healthcare system and our prescriptions. The dependency that happens when we're going into not only months and months and months of prescribing, but what they're prescribing and the dosages that they're prescribing. And now we're going into decades. One individual, decades and decades and decades of being on benzodiazepine and not even having a blessed clue what's happening to them. If they just decide they want to stop, or they're abruptly cut off for some reason, or they go through an improper taper with their doctor, there is a brain injury that happens as a result of the protracted withdrawal, which then goes into something they call BIND, BIND, which is benzodiazepine-induced neurological disorder. Now, this is not, ironically enough, caused by the drug that comes with its own horrific side effects. This is a literal brain injury that can be scientifically proven. It can be shown on a brain scan. That happens due to a tapering that's much too fast and absolutely abrupt, and even the much too fast can be life-threatening. That's just the reality of it. Grand mal seizures, there's just a number of things. They have to be done in a very specific, particular way, long-term, and that's not happening. So here's where I want to back out. I'll put a lot of posts up and a lot of videos up about, how to interview your doctor, red flags to look for. The standard answer, if you seek help, and this is mainly from a psychiatrist, if you're getting these from a psychiatrist, I now have a pending lawsuit against neuropsychiatric clinics, or they were going by Neuropsychiatric of Atlantis, located in Villa Rica, Georgia, and Dallas, Georgia. And I've told that story in a few videos, and I'm sure I'll get into it again in the future as that unfolds. But in any event, we're notorious for this too, losing our train of thought. There is a very specific way, if you choose to be off them. Most people, given the choice, just wouldn't. They just wouldn't go off it because at some point they've experienced that withdrawal. And the best word people can use, and they say it really doesn't do it justice, is torture. Neurologically, physiologically, physically, the sleep deprivation alone can throw you into a psychosis. It's just a nightmare. But the bottom line is, unlike SSRIs and other recreational drugs, opiates or opioids, fentanyl, heroin, these things will make you feel really crappy. I've seen people go through cold turkey withdrawals on these, and you might feel like you want to die, but technically you'll get well. Not the case with benzodiazepine. If you don't actually have a loss of life from an improper or too quick tapering, an abrupt withdrawal it's illegal at this point. They've been getting away with doing that because they're pissed off. You call them out on something, or you just generally annoyed him by following up and being responsible for your prescriptions and making sure that they're filled, especially when you're going through a taper. You can't play. You really have to take your exact dosages at the same time. And now they have this new issue that's come up. Most of the time, if you're starting off new, especially with a psychiatrist, but even other kinds of providers, and you're there for benzodiazepine management, In other words, you have not found the right help. I'll be uploading some clips from a diagnosis, actually, an interview that Dr. Daniel Amen from Amen Clinics did with Kate Hudson and her brother, which was really, really interesting. The diagnostic tools that he uses are absolutely amazing. These diagnoses that they give. First of all, my strong advice is, if you can't see it on a scan, you can't prove it with bodily fluids, be it blood, urine, saliva, in some way. There is no such thing as a diagnosis based on a 10-minute, maybe 20-minute appointment, first time appointment with a doctor who has to wait and see. We don't really know whether they're going to work or not. We have to wait and see how you respond to them. And, in my case, and the majority of cases, the vast majority of cases, the self-exiting ideology stepped right in. My capacity to do absolutely everything was taken from me. And their solution, once in a while, I'd be a little suspicious. Maybe it has something to do with these SSRIs. The benzodiazepine, you know that it's working. You can physically feel that. Unfortunately, before the tolerance sets in, there is a very pleasant, relaxing, euphoric feeling that comes from it. But basically they diagnosed you with some major anxiety disorder. And the reality is, I stopped in my tracks when Dr. Yosef, Tapering Clinic on YouTube, said the most common victim, is what I would call it, that winds up being prescribed these and diagnosed, misdiagnosed, and thrown on SSRIs and benzodiazepine are women in their 30s. Men certainly have their issues with it, but according to him, the most common group of women, people, are women in their 30s that are either postpartum or going through a divorce. I was both of those things. I don't know about postpartum. My son was like 4. They said something about delayed, but I was absolutely, I was married to his father, but I was absolutely kind of raising him as a single mom. And the euphoria of his infancy and early toddlerhood, he was getting older, and his needs deserved and needed to be met. More connection, more outings, more things, more participation, preparing for kindergarten, that sort of a thing. And I worked full time outside of the house. He was the daycare baby. Damn straight, I was stressed. I was really, really stressed out. It was getting to be a handful. To the outside, it looked like a nice little nuclear family, except for a real close inner circle, knew there were problems. But I mean, he had a mistress almost from day one. And when he wasn't working at night, taking him out of the house, after work, his time was spent with her, and he popped in. That's just the reality of it. I was raising him as a single mother. And that's when I started being prescribed this for me. And now I'm hearing from all of you, people on TikTok, right here on YouTube. By the way, if you popped in and you can relate, or need resources or information, you're being both my therapist, and I'm hoping to give you all the best information I can. So give us a thumbs up and subscribe. I'm trying to hit 100. That's my lofty goal. I hear these content creators that I love, trying to hit 2 million. I just want my 100 so I can go live, because it'll be quicker. So if you can do that for me, that would be great. And I want to answer everybody on TikTok, as I'm literally getting hundreds of messages now. and a good handful of them are directly related to the subject. Mothers who have lost children over this, people who are experiencing it right now, and there's a lot of good information in both places. The YouTube, Dr. Yosef with a J at Taper Clinics. I don't do a video without mentioning him. He's connected to all my playlists. Gotta say him. Okay, so I talked a lot about kind of interviewing your doctors and looking for the red flags, and when to see they're obviously not the right provider for you. But here's the problem. Here's where I got to backtrack on this, and I'm just going to be real. We need these assholes. We need these unethical, uncompassionate, unprofessional, willing to risk your life and go about their merry weekend, willing to risk your life and opening another new practice in Florida that is clearly aimed towards senior citizens, a very, very vulnerable group to these unethical psychiatric practices. But I mean, when you think about it, that's how they make their money. All doctors do. But if you take away SSRIs, despite all the good science that they're actually harmful, and the benzodiazepines, which are a freaking nightmare, what do they have? It's not the 40s and 50s where you could just institutionalize women, because they were having a bad day or they were hysterical. I just recently learned the word hysterical, that's where hysterectomy comes from. A lot of women may be struggling with pregnancy back then, or when they were actually going through like sterilizing certain classes of people. That's where the word hysterectomy came from. Just thought that was interesting side note. But I think we need to approach this, because I think what happened with the fentanyl crisis is basically, they got wise to what was happening with the overprescribing of opiates and, severely addicting drugs like the OxyContin. But they didn't have a real good plan in place before the doctors just started cutting people off with no tapering program. Look, these state-run 30-day programs, they don't really treat it much better, if not worse, than the doctor themselves. When you go to a 30-day program to taper off benzodiazepine, when you've been on them for over 25 years, Klonopin in particular, which is, it just stays in the system the longest, it's not going to work. Virtually 98% of those patients upon discharge are right back with their primary care or the first person they can get that will return them to the drug. And they will also load you up on SSRIs, just like the doctor's office tried to do. If you even mention the word taper, it's almost like you have to investigate them before you even go to see if they are an appropriate or knowledgeable enough doctor or a compassionate enough doctor. Some of them damn well have the knowledge. They just really don't give a rat's ass. What can I say? It's just the truth. And they've been getting away with this with impunity for decades. This lawsuit is far from unprecedented. Within the past 5 to 7 years, automatically, when you go in, if they say, well, okay, we're going to get you off in 8 weeks and we'll start you on some Seroquel or just name your SSRI and you should be fine. Wrong. not only is it wrong, but it's actually dangerous. It's extremely dangerous to do that to somebody that's been on benzodiazepine. They know all about seizures and the risk of death. I don't think they take it any more seriously than whatever their standard of care is, or whatever it is they have stuck in their minds. In my particular case, the first provider went right there. I made it real clear I wasn't going to be able to work with her. She was supposed to call in the prescription for that month. And they immediately pushed me to a new provider because, heaven forbid, we don't get the billing on it every month. And she really wasn't too, I didn't find her very knowledgeable. I found her very nice, very pleasant, but not real knowledgeable. Little by little, I kind of, started talking to her about bind and withdrawal and tapering, just kind of get a feel of where she was at. And then my husband was right. He was just like, you know what, get your prescription, answer their questions, get your prescription, disconnect like as quickly as possible. And he was absolutely right. The more information that you give them, it's the more that they're going to hold against you, even though it's really against them in the long run. By the time I got to a point where I was explaining bind and past experiences that I had with withdrawal, she goes, oh, she's writing or pretending to write on my chart, or I think she was actually doodling, because she was kind of looking up at me at the same time. And she goes, oh, yeah, I heard them withdrawals, or no, they're no good, they're not fun. There wasn't one word of the medical dangers of it, or a suggestion, or even a concern, like, be very, very careful with that, that can be serious. So there were a number of things that happened. You can see in my other videos, but today I just wanted to touch base because I did take a sick day yesterday. I promised I would show up every day. I'm still going to do that. But I was legitimately sick, and since I went to the walk-in clinic anyway, why I was there, because you've got to see the video about whatever is happening with the specific benzodiazepine, Klonopin, and Klonopin only. I guess this has been common with some strips and some labs for quite some time. In my case, it's been random and kind of inconsistent. But where I'm at in my tapering is I'm down from 5 to 2 milligrams every night at bedtime. The tolerance is through the roof. The only purpose they serve is to prevent withdrawal or further injury. And we're going to get into tapering programs and the best ways to go about that. But here's the thing, guys, and here's why I want you to subscribe. I want you to share it. Anybody going through this, like I said, Dr. Amen. I'm gonna say amen, amen. Daniel, amen. Absolutely wonderful. He's obsessed with brain health. And that's his first diagnostic tool in diagnosing anybody, is to get scans of the brain. He can name each brain part, when it's supposed to light up and isn't, when it's overlit and shouldn't be, kind of a thing. So that's the first step. And then in treatment, the very last step he recommended in Kate Hudson's case, and this is all out there, he felt that she definitely had ADD, gave her all these other treatments, everything from supplements that he created and sells himself, to hyperbaric chamber treatments. There were like 3 or 4. And then finally he said yes, and we could give you medication. And he named the different kind of amphetamines, and he likes Concerta. But here's my only critique of that entire thing, which I absolutely loved him, and Kate Hudson, like the goddess, She is. She's very, very down to earth and just oozes sweetness right through the camera. And, and so he explained very clearly all those options, which I absolutely loved. Medication or a combination with both. I didn't get the vibe medication alone would be a full treatment that he would recommend. It would be in unison with these other ones, one or more of these other ones. Here's my only critique. And I realize, he might have limitations as a doctor, especially on television. He never once used the word amphetamine. It was all medication, and that's what those stimulant drugs are. And yes, it's the same amphetamine. It's just made in different compounds and under stringent, more strict guidelines and monitored, as you find in I don't know what I can say on here, but you'll get it in Coca-Cola and the crack on the sidewalk. Those type of stimulants, it's the same thing. Methamphetamine. It's the exact same thing. It's the exact same stimulant. That's what makes it work. Yes, it's just cleaner and done in a more controlled environment. So, he mentioned a few side effects like getting a little anxious, a decrease in appetite. My experiences with them has been like a crash afterwards or in between doses. If it was 1 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon, just kind of that crash. And then after taking them 3 or 4 days in a row, and this could have everything to do with the benzodiazepine and taking them both, which as this last psychiatrist who was prescribing them, when we talked about splitting the dosage, 20 milligrams, and we talked about maybe 10 in the morning and 10 in the afternoon, the next appointment, she actually said this. Now, they had been prescribing the benzodiazepine and Concerta for 5-6 months. And she goes, oh, I talked to Dr. Warner about it, Dr. Randy Warner. He is the overseer of this, from what I can see on line, 6-person facility that literally sees hundreds and hundreds of patients a day. Red flag there. I'm smelling the greed. I can smell it. I can smell the greed, and I experience the absolutely unethical practices, right down from a refusal to give me my records, which is a direct violation of HIPAA. A lot of people don't know that because when they ask for their records, for themselves, they are told, we're not allowed to do that. We have to give them to a provider. It's just a lie. It's just a bold-faced lie, and they are counting on you not realizing your rights. There's no loopholes either. They have 30 days to get it to you. Now, they can ask for extension. They have to ask HIPAA, and they have to have a damn good reason for it. So that's one myth that they all seem to pull every time I've asked for records to be given to myself directly. When I say no, they're not going to another provider, I need them for myself. I think there's a high tendency, especially with psychiatrists, not to give them to you because they are inaccurate. Another HIPAA law that protects you. You have a right to correct these inaccuracies, fill in the blanks that you will see. I can tell just based on the screenshot conversations that I had with Dr. Warner. He knew nothing about me via my chart. Absolutely nothing. Why I was there, why I was being treated, and he's the overseer that they claim everything has to go through him, which I wouldn't have committed to a PA or the providers actually had better initials than that if they weren't able to write prescriptions. They will, to give themselves time in case there's an F up, they'll say, oh, it could take up to 42 48 hours, as Dr. Warner has to sign off on everything. But most appointments, once I was established, as soon as we ended the session, I got the little text from Walgreens. So the fact that they lied to you is a given. It's a given in, I'm going to be generous and say 90% of the cases. If you have found an honest, ethical psychiatrist that truly has your best interest in heart, and this one, it was a perfect example. They had my medical records going back to the previous state that I lived in when I started these SSRIs, which I have not taken in decades, proving, and it's easier to list what I didn't take as opposed to what I did, and how it just chipped away at my life almost instantly. It started. That sadness I was feeling, the one that made me, want to seek some cognitive therapy. I was feeling a little sad. I was just so obsessed with this baby of mine. I wasn't really paying attention or really caring all that much what his father was doing. That was just the truth until I did. Until I realized I needed help. There was a reason I wanted my children born into a nuclear, two-parent family, biological parents, and he just couldn't fit in that square. He didn't want it to begin with. I don't know why he eventually even decided to marry me. By that point, there was absolutely no pressure whatsoever. I had accepted. He was not thrilled about this pregnancy, wanted out, always had a girlfriend, always had somebody else on the side, and I finally just accepted it. I was young. I was still perfectly able to put that family together. And I don't know about you. Let me know in the comments. A lot of guys that are kind of like that, they don't want to commit, or they're gun shy, or they're not interested in marriage, and you've been really honest and upfront, like that's where you want to go, and all of a sudden, okay, you're free then. No strings attached. I didn't want to go through the courts. It was like, hey, throw me $50 a week, go stay with your mother until you figure out what you're going to do. And he did that, and I started dating, and I didn't do too bad, and it was like the minute and I'm speaking to him specifically, but this just happened with relationships along my adulthood. It's like they don't want you until a bunch of other people do. And then all of a sudden you get very interesting. So it was at that juncture that he just had to get married as fast as possible. And my older sister like rushing it all together and pulling this beautiful beachside wedding together, and then sending me a fucking bill for it afterwards. Like, duh, I should have known. But anyway, a lot of things, contributed into the beginning of the story. But now we're at the end of this story, and we're going to be going into the beginning of a new one. I have been, I feel my case is almost supernatural in that there was a lot of divine intervention after this experience with the psychiatrist. It was literally as though my mind started coming back, and it is, all the glory goes to God. But let me tell you, there was a lot of work done. In terms of, I was a lifelong cigarette smoker. I think it's been 6-7 years on that. Exercise, walking in particular. I am 62 years old, and I've got myself up to 8 miles a day. I've also been in the gym. I've done muscle resistance work, and got to get back to that. But right now I'm finding the most benefit is coming from that walk outside by water in the woods. It's just a whole spiritual experience. Why it heals my body. It gets those good brain chemicals moving, endorphins and dopamine, and it just starts waking up a lot of centers that have been harmed. I mean, this is no joke. It's a brain injury that's been brought on by decades and decades of the use of this stuff. Supplements, anything and everything like with omega-3s in it, is the brain just loves it. And, to really, really believe, not just know the information and store it and not use it, but to actually believe that neuroplasticity is a thing. The brain can and does rewire itself almost as beautifully as the liver can restore and reheal and regrow. There are so many things you can do. We're going to have a whole series on that. If you're in a taper or you're beginning one or you're starting to think about one, even if you're on them and you constantly live in the fear that I once did, that the doctor's going to retire, there'll be a new doctor that wants to do it differently, something will happen with the insurance, and literally being enslaved, my life having to be built around, that, just that feeling of relief every month after you got through your appointment and they called it in. Now, I've been extremely, extremely responsible with my medication, so that hasn't been too much of a problem. If you're going through something or you're abusing them in some way, and you're starting to show up at ER rooms because you ran out early, or you're looking for early refills, they won't deal with that. Number one. Insurances may cover up to a certain number of days early, but the pharmacy records and your refill dates and your appointment dates must coincide. In other words, if anything, there might be a tablet or two left over at the end of the month, and I won't even do that anymore. I'm so precise in my dosage and tapering. All that being said, I want to wind this up with telling you about my visit yesterday. I had a little infection brewing, and I went to the walk-in clinic for an antibiotic. And why I was there, because you can see the whole video I did about the Klonopin not showing up in tests, or in my case, and now I'm hearing from a handful of people that it's been random and sporadic. Sometimes it was showing and sometimes it wasn't, probably since 22. I think 2022 was the first time it happened. There's one definitive case that I know about where it just has not shown up with this patient's doctor ever. In all the, I don't know how many years she's been being prescribed this particular Klonopin, but I know it's been a long time, and he doesn't even do urines anymore, knowing that it's not going to show. Now, I have done a little research, but I really don't have answers as to why the labs, whether it be, the sticks that they use sometimes right there in the office, or, they send it out to a different lab, which I actually spoke to the last one where I came back negative. And I think the person that I spoke to was very, very sincere and having no idea why that would happen. He came up with a plausible reason, sometimes, especially he didn't understand I was talking only about Klonopin not showing up. Everything else will come up positive for benzodiazepine except Klonopin. Why would that be? I would love to know your thoughts on that. Why on earth would they remove the compound in the strips? I'm not a lab tech. I don't know how this works, but I imagine there's some work done. I got to address TikTok too. I imagine there's got to be some work done in changing the whole process so it will only come up negative only for Klonopin. Now, in my taper, and consistently every single day for the past 7 years, including the tapering process down to the 2 that I'm on now. It is always, always in my system. I had long-term established relationship with my providers who know and trust that. So the first time it happened, they asked me about it. The person that actually did the test mentioned it, but by the time I got into the provider, her exact words were, I'm not even worried about it. I was worried about it. I'm like thinking there's something wrong with me, my metabolism, my thyroid, what? And I didn't know it, but she had sent out for a secondary screen. They do the in-house test, I guess, with the little strip. And they went ahead, unbeknownst to me, and actually sent it out to a lab. So now the urine's really been sitting there for a while. And like the guy at the lab said, sometimes that can happen by the time it gets to us. If there was a late pickup, it can, dissipate a little bit. But he really, I just got an honest vibe from him that he just didn't have a blessed clue why this would be happening. And it's not just here in Georgia, it's Massachusetts. It was just common knowledge when it was brought up, even to a caseworker that works in a rehab. Oh, yeah. No, they don't show up. Yeah, and they actually had a meeting called to not make a big deal out of it, especially with established patients. So, look, I hate to be pessimistic because I'm feeling real optimistic and I'm feeling real hopeful. I love where I am. I love where I'm going. I love the people that have subscribed and that are following on TikTok. And because we are doing this ourselves. We're not Kate Hudson. No shade to Kate whatsoever. We don't have those kind of resources to get into doctors like Dr. Amen and Dr. Yosef. They're wonderful. The more osteopathic, homeopathic type doctors that are looking into this. And hear this, psychiatrists, there is still plenty of ways to make your money. Dr. Yosef, I don't think, is doing too bad with his tapering clinic. And then sharing his knowledge on YouTube. There are other ways you can do it and remain in your integrity and honor your Hippocratic oath, which Dr. Randy Warner of Neuropsychiatric does not know how to do. And it's kind of like, in this era, we're living in the day of, F around and find out. And he definitely F'd around. It just happened to be with my life. And I just happened to say, you know what? I am mad as hell and I'm not taking this anymore. And then when I found out, I'm not alone. But anyway, go to the doctor yesterday. And just for the hell of it, I asked her to do a drug screen while I was there so I could have a copy of it. I have an upcoming appointment with an unrelated doctor that I want to show this to. And another really good tip, I think, as of last night, my husband actually started videotaping it. A close-up picture of the actual drug, which of course I'm not going to put on YouTube, the front and the back so it can be verified. It actually going under my tongue from start to finish. So this proof is constantly there. Dr. Warner, we were going into a back and forth before he ever reviewed my urinalysis. Now, for 25, for the most part, I think they've all come back positive, except for the one that they requested in June, which I don't even think he reviewed yet. So a lot of this crap that he said that I have screenshotted was just, unfortunately, it's not illegal just to be an asshole and to be the most uncompassionate and I would say even dangerous psychiatrist to treat senior citizens or the elderly or the population he is obviously targeting with this practice in Florida. You look at the website and this is all geared to what most of the population is in Florida, the elderly. the most vulnerable, you know, already dealing, perhaps with dementia, memory loss, maybe Alzheimer's, neurological issues. And this jerk is going to load them up with SSRIs, probable benzodiazepines, scary, scary stuff. But yeah, lo and beholds, because like I said, for 25, it's been sporadic. So my husband started filming the actual process last night with an up close, so there's no question that it is, in fact, clonazepam. And negative, 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 negative. So, and I explained to her, why I wanted to have this done and why I wanted it. And, because like I said, it's never not in my system. It has been consistently in my system every single day without interruption for the past 7 years, since I met my husband. End of story. And it basically was for 30 years prior to that, but there were interruptions, we won't even get into those details now. But so it's something to look for. And I want to kind of retract, because at the end of the day, you can't tell these doctors, no, you're not the right doctor for me. You might not have a lot of choices. So what we need to do while remaining ethical and keeping our own integrity, is learn how to play the game. It's a game to them, but for us, it's our lives. And because they won't be, we have to be totally responsible for whatever our decision is. If you're not ready to come off them and you're not worried about somewhere down the road, there could be an interruption, and that's where you are, and you get them every month, no hassles, no problems, that's your business. There are not as serious as bind as an abrupt withdrawal from a too fast taper or a cutoff, but they are known to cause early onset dementia, just a lot of things. But if you are in that school where you that's where I was. I was like, if I'm getting them without any problems, and knowing my brain remembers those withdrawal periods, and it was like you'll fight tooth and nail to avoid that, because this isn't like, I've seen people come off of fentanyl and they are so deathly ill, and the agony, you can't even take a sip of water to try to take an anti-nausea pill without heaving. And that can go on like from 10 days, up to 20 days, but then it ends. And you just have, the depressional part to wear because it's been replacing your dopamine, and the brain needs to remember how to produce those good chemicals that balance us out. But that doesn't happen with benzodiazepine withdrawal. It really never ends. Now, I've heard from pray tell few people that for whatever reason kind of came off them, were on them a couple of years, kind of came off them and didn't seem to have any problems so far. Now, the 4 specific individuals I have in mind just came off them and are saying they don't have any problems. One of those 4 people have stopped sleeping. They stopped sleeping and they went back on Xanax. So anyway, I think that's going to be all for today. But please, 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 if you find any value in this content whatsoever, we're going to be getting better. Technically, I'm going to throw some clips in there. I have a testimony from the Brian Kohlberger case. Kaylee Gonzalez, one of the victims, her sister Olivia, got well, the whole family got to do impact witness statements. This badass, beautiful big sister, everything a big sister should be, mic drop on this guy. And it was just so outstanding to me. I want to incorporate that, as well as the going over the diagnosis with Dr. Daniel and Kate Hudson, which I thought was fantastic. So we have those things coming up. I'm messing around with the editing, trying to put some clips in there, and it'll get better. But in the meantime, just to go live, I think you have to have 100 subscribers. So it had some kind of clock countdown on it today. I'm trying to do it from the laptop instead of the phone, but it's going to get better. It's going to get better. But we need you to subscribe, because we are really kind of all each other has, if you're not in a certain tax bracket, if you catch my drift. You know, if you've had real bad luck and you've come across these unethical doctors that have no problem whatsoever literally destroying your life and possibly taking it or being the cause of exiting the planet. They absolutely know this. His responses to that notation to him were so bizarre. They are being put together to be added into a clip, and that will be a whole series. And they are about to be served within the next 30 days. So I do have a green light from the attorney to talk about it at length and to actually warn people, especially if you're in the Georgia area and you're undecided, if you're a patient of his. I can already see he does not have happy campers. You can look at the Yelp reviews, all of them. They just, you know what it is? They're stuck with him. They're stuck with him. And half of them were minors. It was the parents writing the horrible review because their children got so ill and so damaged while under their care. You know, and like I said, when they told me they have hundreds and hundreds of patients a day, they said it twice, as in hundreds and hundreds, so multiple hundreds. And then you take that by a business week, so are we seeing thousands between the six of you? I thought there had to be 50 providers there. So I smell greed, and there is no way you're going to be able to give appropriate care, keep appropriate, accurate records, and treat a patient according to the science, the good testing, the truth that is now out there about SSRIs. Benzodiazepines, as of 2020, as a result of a lawsuit, federally are supposed to be coming with a black box warning now. If you don't know what that is, I explained it in another video. I'll bring it up another time. I have not got one prescription in 7 years that had that black box label warning on it. So, yeah, that just tells me that they're not really taking this real serious. You know, I think the FDA, who has signed off on all of this, doesn't quite know how to backtrack it yet. And what we don't want is for doctors to just start whipping people off. And, you know, that's why we're stuck with doctors like Dr. Randy Warner now. You know, if you're looking to be treated as a human being with dignity and honor, if you're expecting compassion, if you're expecting actual knowledge about benzodiazepines in particular, but I know they were more than happy to start loading up on SSRIs had I accepted. Obviously, he's not the right provider, but most of them are kind of like that. I just haven't had to use a psychiatrist in years and years to get my prescription. That's a whole nother issue too. I think they were only supposed to be prescribed by psychiatrists initially. You young women can get them from their gynecologist for PMS now. Just, that's the way it is. So we don't want to totally alienate these guys. But, and I would never ever say to lie to your doctor, especially on a direct question, except about a drug history, and we will have an entire video devoted to that and what kind of problems that can get you into, especially if it was like 30 years ago and you break a leg and a hip and you're in the ER room. You just, yeah, there are all kinds of scenarios, and this is why I need you to subscribe. Right now, obviously, you can see the subscribership is low enough that I can pretty much comment to everybody, except on TikTok. Let me answer all my messages on TikTok now. Okay, a handful of you have come right out and said, men, I love you. I love you too. I don't know. I don't know what to say. I think my niche is real clear. And I'm not making fun, and I don't want to alienate. I am grateful. I am grateful for followers, subscribers, all that sort of stuff. I've had some really, really nice comments regarding the YouTube channel and people saying that they're going to come over and subscribe on it. People that are real serious about this particular subject. You know, one woman, God bless you, you know who you are. You shared with me you lost your son over this. You know, and then we have, there were 3 or 4 that their sister needs a boyfriend. Can't help you there. Can't help you there. Where am I from? I was born in Massachusetts. I live in Georgia. That was another one. I'm just addressing them all because these are the most common questions. You know, although I would say like a good 60% of it has been content related, and it doesn't have to be. I mean, you know, if you want to come and hang out, I will. I can't on TikTok. There's just way too many messages. So I'm doing a blanket response to everybody. I'm happily married and not interested in anything like that. A Christian, so I don't do the astrology readings thing. I don't want to check out your OnlyFans site or be led to your sex site or anything like that. You know, like I said, everybody's welcome to follow. I'm just doing a blanket answer for some of the I'm a boomer, guys. All right, so you gotta cut me a little slack here. I am a boomer. TikTok wasn't a thing until this became a thing. And what I'm trying to do, I don't know what's going on with TikTok. I heard something about it's being sold to another company in September. I knew it was supposed to be shut down, and then Trump extended it. So if you guys know anything about that, let me know in the comments. But I try to get everybody over here. I need subscribers to go live, and this is my daily therapy. It really, really is, hearing from you guys. And I realize it's a very specific niche. You know, it's not politics, it's not religion, although God is the number one aspect of my life, and I honestly believe that's why I am here right now doing this. And you know, that's the end game. I want total freedom from this garbage, from having to enslave myself to these doctors who, frankly, I could educate them on benzodiazepines. I don't feel cocky saying that in any way, shape, or form. And I'm no genius, guys. That's just a fact. And I just see myself doing a lot of advocacy, you know, for myself and for anyone else that needs it. That kind of makes me feel alive, you know, when I get a real question, when I hear from a mom who lost her son, when I hear for a guy that hasn't slept in 14 days so far. When I hear from a 19-year-old girl that cannot show up at her job anymore, she cannot leave the house, she cannot drive. When I hear from a 67-year-old woman who wound up having to be hospitalized via the ER room because she had a Dr. Randy Warner type jerk that abruptly cut her off over his ego being bruised, which is exactly what happened to Dr. Warner. Those things aren't crime, but the abrupt cutoff and the absolutely no interaction or way to keep me safe medically, twice, because the ER room visit, just upon meeting them for the first time in 7 years, I have not had any problem or interruption until I got involved with them, and they were real clear on why I was there. And then the second time, it was an abrupt cutoff. It was the grace of God that provided a provider who is very much aware that Klonopin does not show up in urinalysis anymore. And only Klonopin. You don't have to worry about it if you're on another benzodiazepine. We need these to show up. And the fact that they're not, and this is going on nationwide, most doctors, from what I can feel in my soul and my spirit, they know it's not showing up. So I don't know if it's some kind of a tool to say you're abusing it or misusing it or not. I don't know, but I'll tell you what, I'm going to find out. I've already started calling labs. I got this done independently. I'm taking these videos of taking the medication every single night. And if Klonopin is the benzodiazepine you are currently taking or tapering from, do the same thing. I have not heard of any of the other benzo family not showing up on your screens, but it can cause you a lot of problems, and it can give these unethical doctors, which is the title they may have gone to school for, but I don't think they really deserve to have reason, as pretend as it may be, to harm you with that. They've been getting away with it for a while. The Klonopin not showing up is a new thing. I just heard of it for the first time like in 22, and then it seemed to have stopped for a while. All was well, everything was showing up, and then, like I said, it was sporadic, happening periodically, and as of June it was negative. This is the second test. The new provider, thank God, doesn't do them. He knows it's not going to show up. So this was done independently, and I see another doctor in August that I want to go over this. He probably does about 3 urines a year, but that he knows that's supposed to be in there. And there was one time even in his office, it didn't show up. But nothing, no explanation, no trouble around it. So something nefarious is going on there. My spidey senses are going crazy around this one. And like I said, I want to advocate. So we need to find out why Klonopin is not showing up on urinalysis. And we can stop there. And then, like I said, I have a few cool things coming up, including that interview with Kate Hudson and Dr. Daniel. And just that impact statement from Kaylee Gonzalez, God rest her soul, and her beautiful, heartbroken family. Olivia is her oldest sister. And sociopaths, psychopaths, narcissists really aren't going to get all riled up or show any emotion over a sobbing grandmother or a heartbroken mother. But when you get somebody that knows where to kind of point out to him in his own age, same generation. And what she said to him, although he just had a dead fish stare the whole time, you could see the very, very controlled anger. You could see the facial muscles tighten up. I think he shifted once. He just stared at every single one of them with those like weird cold eyes. But she had a few things to say to him that, let's just put it this way, Olivia. You'll probably never see this, but you did Kaylee proud. You did her proud. And on that note, I'll see you guys tomorrow.